Welcome to the Iron Self podcast, where we jump into health, fitness, mindset, and becoming the best version of yourself. Today with your hosts, Mike and Kayla Minion. On today's podcast, we welcome Crystal Steers. After getting her bachelor's in psychology in 2010, Crystal realized she didn't want to pursue a career in any of the available fields related to her area of study. So she took some drastic steps and sold most of what she owned and moved across the country to a place she had never been. That change gave birth to a whole new life and mindset for her. She started Chasing Happiness, a business built around the fact that everyone deserves to be happy and live a life that is meaningful to them. She started this dream job as a way to help others make changes in their lives. Through one-to-one coaching, a podcast, a book club, and public speaking engagements, Crystal is helping people to chase their dreams regardless of where they find themselves in life. She believes that everyone has a story to share with others, and everyone can learn from others' stories. Please, with a warm welcome Crystal Steers. Well, welcome, Crystal. We are so excited to have you on today's podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we are super excited to dive into your knowledge and talk about expanding our mindset to make big changes. And I know that you've made lots of big changes and on a whim changes. So we want to hear all about your expertise and what really works.
Yeah, so I happen to be one of these people who just tends to make really big changes. When I realize I want a life change, it tends to be something pretty drastic. So just in the last month, actually, I have moved from Southern Ontario to Halifax, Nova Scotia. I had never been out east before, so this was an experience for me. I've never seen Halifax or, New Brunswick or parts of Quebec. I drove from Southern Ontario out here because obviously we're in the middle of COVID. So there was a whole bunch of logistical issues and it was just easier to drive. And it's not the first time I've made sort of a crazy move like this. About 6 years ago, I moved from Southern Ontario to Edmonton, Alberta, and had never been there before either. So I like big changes, and that's not for everyone. A lot of people need to be able to plan. They need to be able to, logistically sell a house, move kids from schools, all of those things. So not everybody needs to make huge life changes when they're, feeling they need some sort of change. But I think at least once or twice in our lives, we should all have some sort of big life change like that because it teaches you a lot about who you are and how you handle really high stress situations, and then the best way for you to handle those, because the answer isn't the same for everyone. Some people need daily meditation in order to handle stress. Some people need physical activity to handle it. Some people need to bake. Some people need to clean. Everybody has a different coping strategy, essentially. And so making those sorts of big changes can be really scary, but they're also really transformative. So I highly recommend big changes, but it's definitely not something that's for everyone.
For sure. One of the things that I love is that, like, obviously you're action oriented, which is great because a lot of people kind of get stuck in those planning phases and they never actually take the action to go towards whatever they're thinking about moving towards. So I absolutely love that you're able to take that action to begin with, and then the just being able to adapt to those situations as you go too, right? And like you said, everybody deals with stressors different in their life, but having some way to deal with your stress effectively is so important for everybody. So those two things that you said there, I absolutely loved.
Well, and the other part is that on the other side of fear is this great transformation, and I think that's a keynote to kind of talk about in regards to, like you said, like you've had all these transformations from this. Most people, when they experience change or think about creating change in their life, whether that be for a habit or routine or a big move or a big job transition, whatever that is, there's that aspect of fear, and that fear comes from our brain not really knowing, right? Not being 100% certain on what's to come. And a lot of people will get trapped by that fear and not really want to take that jump. Whereas you're like, well, screw it. I'm taking this freaking jump. Let's just jump right in.
Well, and that fear comes from living in the future, right? You're thinking about that future constantly. So you're not living in the moment. You're living in the future and that worry and that thought process of what if. Whereas when you're living in the moment, like clearly you have been, it's like, all right, let's go, right?
So how do you overcome that fear?
Well, fear is an interesting thing. So, as someone who has a degree in psychology, I could go into the specifics of fear, but I think what's more important for your listeners is we now live in a society where we don't have to worry about the things that we actually, from an evolutionary standpoint, fear was built for, right? We have fear built into our brains because we needed it in order to survive. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, that was what was necessary. It's not anymore. Most of us have shelter. Most of us have pretty easy access to food. Our basic needs are met, but that fear part, it doesn't go away. It's still built in. So we as humans have just come up with really quote unquote smart ways to replace it with something else. And so now it gets replaced with the what ifs. And the problem with that is if you're someone who's constantly thinking about what if this doesn't work, you're living in a negative mindset all the time because in the back of your mind, you're constantly thinking, what if this doesn't work out? My life will fall apart. And the truth is, most of the time, if you make a decision, let's say, for example, this moving to Nova Scotia, if I had gotten out here and within the first 30 days decided, wow, this really is not for me, what's the worst thing that would happen? I would start to work on a plan to move back, right? My life does not implode because I made a decision and then I changed my mind because it wasn't what I wanted. And we as human beings tend to think if we make one decision, we're stuck with it forever. And that's not the truth. Everything, with the exception of maybe death, can be undone, right? Like there's very few choices we make in life. And granted, there are a couple of other choices, but there are very few choices that can't be undone or can't be changed in some way. So the fear aspect is really important because when I approach something that I am a little fearful about, that I do have those moments of, well, what if this doesn't work out? I do two things. And this is my personal process. It may not work for everyone. But the first thing I do is I make a list. Okay, so if this goes wrong, how am I going to cope with that? What are my backup plans? And the second thing I do is remind myself we are capable of really hard things as human beings. We've forgotten that because we live in this comfortable world. We've forgotten we are capable of tearing apart things and then building them back together. Maybe not exactly the same way, but we are totally capable of doing that. We're capable of providing ourselves with shelter, with food if need be. Like, we've lost the ability to think that way because life has become so comfortable, essentially. And so I'm constantly reminding myself, and I have sticky notes all around my house to remind myself, you're capable of hard things. You're capable of difficult and complex things. And sometimes you are going to fall. Sometimes you're going to make huge mistakes. That's okay. That's part of the human experience. It doesn't make you any less than if you decide to move across the country and then change your mind. You're allowed to change your mind because you as a human being develop, change, grow. Your preferences develop, change, grow. That's part of the human experience. So for anyone who is sort of stuck in that fear stage, I highly recommend at least taking some time to remind yourself about the hard things you've done so far. Let's be frank. Most of us have experienced a couple of hardships in our lives. You don't get to be 40 like I am without having at least a few, right? There have been hard things. We just don't take the time to stop and look back at them and realize, dang, we did a really good job there. So start there. And then if you are a planner, if you need to come up with some backup plans, do that as well. But remind yourself, it can all be changed. It can all be undone if it doesn't work out the way you want.
Building that resilience, right? I love that you're talking about the sticky notes. And I love notes and I
She
write
loves
notes.
lists.
I like lists.
When you said lists, I saw her eyes kind of light up there.
But I can't always remember to like put sticky notes up and to read them. So I actually have it tattooed on my wrists for anybody that's watching the video. So on one wrist is strength, and that's to remember of all the hard things that I can do and that I can go through. And on the other wrist is beauty, and that is to see the good in life. And so I've got that kind of constant reminder for me there. And I love that you kind of said, giving yourself that constant reminder, check back with yourself and look at how far you've come and check out what are the hardest things, like what is the worst case scenario, right? I always said when Mike and I made the leap into working full time together and working on building a business together, we were like, holy crap, how are we going to make this work? And
How are we going to make it work without killing each other?
and I said, what is the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen, we're going to lose our house. We're going to end up in an apartment building in some downtown center. That's going to be like essentially we'd be back in a city somehow because of cost and all of that kind of stuff that goes hand in hand with that. But is that really the worst case scenario? Like, if that is the worst case scenario, I can still be happy. I can still enjoy life. So why not take a risk and take a jump and just see what happens? Because life is about those risks that we take. And that's really where we grow and develop, like you've already said. And that's where we learn the most about ourselves. If you're always playing it safe, how are you ever going to learn about yourself and learn who you truly are and what you're capable of?
Well, we always talk about failing forward too, right? So you need to experience things. You need to try things in order to be able to even fail. And failing is where you learn your biggest lessons, right? So fail forward. Try things. Like we always tell our kids, do hard things. When we take them like we have a 9, a 7, and a 3-year-old, and they climbed like an 8,000-foot mountain this summer with us. And, we always preach to them, do hard things, because life is going to throw you curveballs. You need to be able to adapt to these and work your way through them. So do hard things. Try things outside of your comfort zone, right? Find where your comfort zone actually is, because some people live so comfortably that they never hit those outer limits of their comfort zone even.
And that's exactly where transformation happens, is outside of that comfort zone, right? So not just your kids, but every person listening to your podcast, you can, in a comfortable way, slowly move yourself out of that comfort zone, right? You guys didn't wake up one morning and say to your kids, okay, we're going to climb this mountain. You made sure they could hike for a long distance. You made sure they could handle some of that physical requirement. The same thing is true for the rest of our lives and everyone who listens to this podcast. Start small, baby steps, right? Learn to slowly walk different levels outside of that comfort zone, because that's where the growth happens. That's where the transformation happens. And ultimately, for me, what I do is I ask myself one question: is this physically actually going to kill me? If the answer is no, then I know there's transformation down the road somewhere. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. Yes, it's going to be painful maybe, but that's okay, because who I'm going to be on the other side of that is going to be magical. I just have to get there.
I always think of that movie, The Hangover, with the guy, and then he's like, but did you die? Right?
Exactly.
Like, we made it out alive, and guess what? Look at all the stuff I learned about myself. So when it comes to expanding your mindset to step into the uncomfortable, to step outside that comfort zone, to really take action towards those changes, what kind of things would you recommend for people to do?
So the very first thing I always recommend to my clients, because when a lot of my clients come to see me, they say, I don't even know where to start. And the best place to start is to actually sit down and think about, what did you love to do as a kid? Because a lot of times what happens as we grow up and become adults is we take on all of this stuff from the world around us and we forget who we started out as. And 9 times out of 10, there is something that you did as a kid that sort of sets your soul on fire. It's the thing that you loved doing. Maybe it was jumping out of trees and your parents told you not to do that, whatever it happened to be, right? So you stopped doing it. And I'm not advocating that people go back to jumping out of trees, but if you loved that kind of excitement, look for things you can do as an adult that bring you that kind of excitement. Figure out ways to sort of build that into your regular life in a safe and meaningful way to you, and expand on that. Maybe if you are someone who liked jumping out of trees, maybe you want to learn how to skydive. Maybe you want to start teaching skydiving. Like, there are lots of different ways that you can look at all of these different aspects of life. But the most important thing is to figure out what is meaningful to you. And the best way to do that, if you don't know where to start, go back to your childhood before you started worrying about what everybody else thought and what made everybody else happy. Because we just inevitably, as human beings, tend to take on everybody else rather than continue to focus on who we are individually.
See, that's why I don't want to skydive, because I don't like jumping out of trees.
See, well, but yeah, like when you're a kid, all of your base needs, for the most part, for most children, I'll say, most base needs are met, so they just get to live how they want to, which is a beautiful thing, because
Exactly.
it's like that the innocence of a child, right? They get to experience life, and there are no worries outside of I'm just going to go and enjoy myself half the time, which is amazing.
Exactly.
See, my big thing is I always make the financial commitment, and then once I've like done that, I feel like I'm committed to it. So like, we went rappelling and down we canyoning. Is that what it's called?
Canyoning.
Canyoning. This past summer, down in Banff, Alberta, and I'm terrified of heights. Um,
She did her first cliff dive into water.
Yeah, but it was
Aw.
like the fact that I had made that financial commitment and the fact that I didn't have another option. My option was jump off this cliff or climb back up the canyon. And so, sometimes I feel like that's where you really grow is that you almost are forced into that change, and that's kind of a good place to be sometimes. Maybe not all the time,
Absolutely.
but
Well, and that's where the change happens, right? That's where the personal development happens. And as you said, like you did have the option. You could have walked back down or you could have jumped. So technically you had an option. Maybe neither one was super comfortable in the moment, but you did it and you expanded because you did it. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Push ourselves a little bit further, expand our minds, expand who we are spiritually, physically, emotionally. Because if we don't check in with ourselves and say, am I going to be okay? Then we're also not checking in with ourselves to say, am I pushing myself enough? Or have I just become comfortable? And that's the important thing, right? We don't want to be living so comfortably that we're not really living. We want to be thriving in this life. And the only way to do that is to push that comfort zone.
100%. And for me, that change took place with having a support system around me, like this group of people that I didn't know outside of Mike. But without their support and um, their what's the word I'm looking for? Like re- ref- reaffirming the fact that I was going to be okay. Reaffirming, that's the
There you
word.
go.
There we
Yep,
go.
yep.
Reaffirming the fact that I was going to be okay. I made that jump. And with a lot of changes that I've personally taken in my life, I know that having that support system going, you know what, you're going to be okay, we're here to support you, has been crucial, whether they are people you know or people you don't know. And just learning from other people's experiences, going, oh, okay, they did that. Like Crystal moved to Nova Scotia, no problem. I can do that too. Yeah, no big deal. If she did it and didn't die, I can do it and not die.
And I'm
Right.
I'm the other way actually. Like for myself, anytime there's been like a huge growth, it's been, trust the universe and move in the direction that feels right. Like I moved from Ontario to BC and happened to meet this absolute beauty of a person. Kind of on a whim, more or less, after I finished high school. I was like, I need a change, and I up and left, and then it turned out to be the best change I ever made. So again, it's like kind of that listen to the universe and see where it takes you, right? And like for our family, we've had some pretty big moves too. We've gone, from Victoria, BC, out to Entwistle, Alberta, like which is west of Edmonton there, and then back to BC and back to Alberta, and like we've kind of bounced around everywhere. But it's again just kind of listening to the universe and moving with it.
Well, and you guys bring up a point that I think is really important for all of the listeners because you both have different strategies, and that's okay. So often I will hear from people, especially people who contact me because they want to work with me. I can't do what you did, but I want you to teach me how to incorporate it into my life. And you don't got to do what I did. You don't got to do what anyone else does. You just got to figure out a way that works for you, that makes sense to you to achieve the change you're looking for. And everyone, regardless of relationship, you guys are married, you have two different strategies. That's okay because you communicate about it. You work on what works for both of you in those situations. And ultimately, that's the important part, right? Like, figure out what does work for you individually and then take the steps that you need to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's so important with every aspect of life that no two people are the same, right? Like when Kayla and I build workouts for people, you couldn't give the same workout to two people basically ever. Like even when we
Exactly.
run our transformation program and things like this, where it's like, okay, we're gonna make these programs. You have to individualize for every single person their nutrition, their movement patterns, how you're going to teach them how to breathe properly, like everything that goes
Right.
along with it. Everybody learns differently and everybody is at a different stage in their life. So teaching everybody the exact same thing isn't going to resonate and it'll never land properly. So again, it's
Right.
that ability to shift and adapt and be able to provide what's needed for everybody because everybody's so unique.
Yeah.
So when it comes to expanding that your mindset around this whole topic of self-improvement, self-development, pushing ourselves, how do we get our mind in the game that we can do this? Like building that confidence, I'm going to say, because it's not just about the taking the action. I think sometimes we need to have the confidence.
There has to be a driving factor.
Yes, there has.
100%. And for a lot of people, you touched on something that's really important in that process, and that's having a community. And it doesn't matter whether it's an online community, it doesn't matter if it's a group of entrepreneurs, you need a support system. It could be one person who's your support system. It could be 100 people, but you need a support system because we all, regardless of who we all have days where we second guess ourselves, where we think maybe we can't handle what's in front of us. And you need someone to be able to communicate with in those moments who can say, look at all the other hard things you did. Look at all the other amazing changes you made. You've got this, and I'm here if you need me. We all need that. So if you're somebody who doesn't have that, seeking that out is one of the most important things you can do, whether it's an online community, an in-person community, maybe it's just a chat group that you meet. Whoever it happens to be, you need to have some sort of a support system. And for a lot of people nowadays, that is actually leading into coaching, right? People are looking for personal physical fitness coaches, nutrition coaches, mindset coaches, all of those things. But for some people, it's just expanding their actual network in real life. And that's okay too. Again, it goes back to what works for you. But having a support system is super important. You're also going to want to start small. Most people can't make huge, giant changes and actually stick to those huge, giant changes because life gets in the way. So if you're someone who drinks 8 cups of coffee a day, but you want to get a little bit healthier, you're going to start by having a glass of water instead of a cup of coffee, right? You're not going to stop drinking coffee altogether because in 2 weeks you're going to hate your life and go back to drinking coffee. So start with those sorts of small changes. If you're looking to change your mindset, maybe start journaling at the end of the day. Think about one thing that was good that happened in the course of your day. And maybe it's one small thing. Today I'm grateful that I was able to have a cup of coffee. Or today I'm grateful that my kids had a good day at school. Maybe it starts small for you, and that's okay. Maybe you're somebody who wants to start a little bit bigger. Create an actual gratitude practice. Create something in your daily life that will allow you to meditate, whether that's, 30 minutes with your kids playing downstairs, whatever it happens to be. Everybody's is going to look a little bit different, but you need to start incorporating things that help you to change that mindset. And if you start small, you're more likely to continue to do it long term.
If you're ready to make a change in your life, step into the best version of you, check out our Iron Self Transformation Program. Find more info on our website, www.ironbodycoach.com. It needs to be easy or effortless when it comes to those kind of changes.
To start it out, that's the most important thing, because if you try and change, and we do this with our clients, right? You can't change everything at once. You need to start breaking down what we actually want to change over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, and then we actually have to start just stacking goals, right? So it's getting these small successes and just stacking it on top. It's like, okay, so now you're eating whole food. Amazing. What's next? Well, now we got to get your protein up. Awesome. And we're going to get you walking, or we're just going to get some general movement, some breathing happening so that we can start stacking all these little wins. And after, 3 months, 6 months, it's crazy what you see, because people are like, I didn't think I was going to be successful when I started, but because we did it in a sustainable way, I've been, just knocking all my goals down, which is what we always shoot for.
I think that a big part of this too is that a lot of people, they want to see those big changes, but they don't want to take the small strides that kind of it takes to get there.
They don't know how to.
And then they worry about what I'm going to call all the fluffy stuff that doesn't matter, right? Like we get people that aren't eating whole foods come to us and go, oh, so when should I be eating around my workouts? let me tell you, if you work out nutrition timing, doesn't freaking matter if you're not eating like regular, like whole foods that are going to nourish your body, or
Right.
like, should I cut out carbs or should I cut out fats? Eat food. Like, like what makes you feel good? If sitting on your butt and eating chips at night is what's causing you to feel good, yet the next morning you feel sluggish and tired, let's get rid
Right.
of the chips at night. Let's replace it with something else that maybe gives you a similar aspect or change the behavior at nighttime altogether.
But a lot of this comes back to what we talked about at the start. There was like they get almost paralyzed by planning, right? They're over planning. They're thinking of what they should do, and they're over
Right.
analyzing every little aspect. When the reality is they just need to take some action towards the goal that they want, which is okay. The first thing you got to do is start eating whole foods, or start walking, or start breathing or meditating, whatever it might be. But you just need to get off the couch and start doing whatever that is, right? Or get off the couch, get off the bench. What I'm saying is you can't just sit there and plan forever. It needs to be that action.
100%. And I think people get stuck because we now live in this weird social media world of instant gratification. And people think, well, if I stop eating the potato chips tonight, then I should lose 5 pounds this week. And it doesn't work that way, right? Mindset doesn't work that way either. There is nothing that you can do right now in this moment that will change your life permanently tomorrow. It's small changes over time, gradually, that you stick with that ultimately cause the change in your mindset and in your lifestyle. And we don't live in a society that rewards that. We live in a society of instant gratification. So people want to see 5 pounds off the scale today. They want to see, oh, I'm now grateful for my life and it's only been 2 days. It does not work that way. And I really, really hope that if people take anything from today, it's that it's okay if you don't see instant gratification, because I promise you 6 months down the road, when you look back, you will notice the change. It will be a part of your everyday life, and you will look back and go, oh my God, I cannot believe that's who I used to be. And that's how it works for everyone. But nobody talks about that because people go, look at this huge change in my life, rather than like, I didn't just get to Nova Scotia, right? There were decisions that had to be made. There was processes that had to be put in place. Things had to unfold in a certain manner. And there was struggle in there, and that's okay. We have to start looking at things long term rather than this instant gratification world we live in.
It's about taking those chances on what you're willing to change. We have a worksheet that sometimes we do with our clients. It's like want, willing, won't. And it kind of gets you in that idea of like, okay, well, what are you willing to change now? And we'll talk about that down the road. Like I had a client that came to me in January, and like this is last January. She expected to be with me for 3 months, to drop 30 pounds in 3 months, which I was never going to promise. And what we're like almost a year later now, and she's a different person. When she came to me, she was like, I don't want to work out. I only want to just change my food. Sweet. Let's meet you where you're at today. Let's make that change. And over this past year, she's like, I want to work out. Oh my goodness. And now we're at a point where it's like, I'm actually backpedaling a little bit. Hey, I need you to take a rest day. Because you get addicted to those feel good endorphins that come with it. But
Yeah.
it's like riding a bike. You don't just jump on and know how to ride. You need to jump on, you need to fall off a couple times. And then eventually you find that balance point and you can find where you can coast. But starting with those small changes, like you said, with meeting yourself where you're at, I think that's huge. And when it comes to New Year's resolutions, I mean, this is like the best piece of advice we can give, because everybody's going to jump on the bandwagon in January. The gyms are going to be packed. Everybody's going to buy their Peloton membership. And they're like, I'm going to make this change. And February, it's like ghost town, right?
And that's the reason why, right? People don't start where they are. They start where they think they need to be. And so the same thing happens with mindset, with physical activity, with all of nutrition, right? People are like, well, I spent all of December eating all the cake and cookies and whatever. So now I can't eat anything like that for like 6 months, and I have to be. And look, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not meeting yourself where you are in the moment. If you're somebody who never goes to the gym, you cannot expect your butt to be at the gym 5 days a week for an hour a day. It is not going to happen. It might happen for a week or two because you're all excited about this new change that you're making, but then life is going to get in the way. So start where you are. Go to the gym for 30 minutes once a week. And then when you're comfortable with that, when it's become routine, add to that. Same thing with mindset. Don't expect yourself to suddenly be living this wonderful, grateful life if you've never even stopped to be grateful for what you have. Start small. Meet yourself where you are in the moment. Make a small change that you know you can maintain for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long your time frame is. And let's be frank, this whole conversation about like change happens in 21 days. Let me tell you, from a scientific data standpoint, that is not true. People who tell you that are lying to you. That's old science. Get rid of it. It's going to take you at least 6 to 8 weeks to make any kind of lasting change. And that's the starting place. That is not the success factor. So as we do more of this research, whether it's about mindset, whether it's about physical activity, we learn more and more. And one of the things that we learn is humans are complex. Not everything is going to work for everyone. And if you don't start small and meet yourself where you are in that moment, you will not have success long term.
100%. I love this. This is such a great conversation because I really think that it's critical for people to understand the factors that take place to make these big changes. I mean, we see the highlight reel on people's Facebooks and Instagrams, and we look at like these celebrities or these people that have made tons of money in their life from their career, and all you see is when they're at the top. But what did it take to get there? Yeah. How many, stepping stones and fallbacks did they have? What kind of resilience did they build over time?
We always preach that life's about the journey, not the destination, right? So if you are just externally focused on this gratification that's going to happen when you hit your big goal, you're not going to have any enjoyment or any ability to live in that moment and enjoy the process on the way. And that's where you learn all the lessons. You don't learn lessons once you hit your big goal. You've already learned those lessons throughout the entire journey on the way to that goal. Like what you're saying about just starting small. Like if I get a new client in and they're telling me they want 5 days of work, 5 days a week worth of workouts, I always start them at 3. And then I'm like, okay, you do 3 days a week for the next 2 weeks solid without missing your workouts. And sure, we can talk about adding some extra stuff in there for you.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? People, especially at this time of year, because of the holidays and because of New Year's resolutions, I don't even know how we got into this like New Year's resolution thing, but it is the most damaging thing to the human psyche that exists, because every single person sets themselves up for failure by saying, I'm going to change my whole life in the next 30 days. And then 30 days comes and goes and it hasn't changed drastically because it can't in that such a short time frame. And people are like, well, I'm just a failure as a human being. I might as well throw it all out the window. And the truth is, we're all human beings. We're all going to fall off the wagon every now and then. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to revert back to old mindsets and old habits. The important thing is to notice when it happens and then get yourself back on track. So rather than saying, well, I missed the gym this week, I might as well not go next week, you say to yourself, well, I missed the gym last week. Maybe this week I only go once because I know I can meet that 1 day commitment. And then I move forward from there, right? We live in such a weird place in this world where we think it has to be all or nothing. And there is no aspect of life that is all or nothing. There just isn't.
Yeah, it's that black and white thinking, right? And it's the same thing like with a nutrition client, let's say, and they have one off day and then you just watch them start to derail and you're like, hold on. Like you get to accept the fact that you made the choice to eat whatever you did or to miss your workout or to not practice your gratitude, whatever it might be. You might have missed a day. That was a choice. That was something where, your priorities weren't in line with what you thought they were that day, which is totally fine. You need to be able to accept that and move past that, right? when people get stuck in that negative thought process after, and they just berate themselves and beat themselves up about how they should have done, they just shit all over themselves, as Kayla likes to say, then it really turns into that, you're just putting yourself down and you're setting yourself up for another day of the same thing. Whereas when you just kind of get up, dust yourself off and say, okay, I had an off day or an off week or an off couple of weeks, whatever it might be, life throws us some curveballs sometimes, so it can't always be perfect. The big thing is how we adapt from that, the lessons we learn, and how we move forward. And I think the big thing there is learning those lessons, right? So, I mean, being able to actually take these scenarios, what's happened in your life, and look at it like a lesson instead of something where it's like, oh, I messed up and, I'm going to punish myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And look at it like, what did I learn from this? Rather than beating yourself up for whatever you think the mistake was, what have I learned? What have I learned about myself? Well, maybe the stress of my, 9 to 5 job makes it so that I can't do 5 days a week at the gym. That's okay. I've learned I can do at least one, which is better than nothing. So let's start there and build on that. The problem is we, as a society, tend to think, well, if I can't do the all or nothing, then it's not worth trying. And that's because we've gotten to this comfortable place of living in our society. And the truth is, any change, no matter how small, is an important change, because you will grow, because you will learn, because people around you will see that change is possible. And so you create a ripple effect of not just making a change in your life, but showing the people in your life that change is possible and success is possible as well.
Let's build on that possibility. I love this because I think that this is the one key element that we've missed this entire time, is that possibility, that belief in self, that opportunity that exists, right? Without that belief in ourselves, we fail because we self-sabotage. We don't believe that we can achieve it. So every time you get close to achieving something, you fall off the horse, because it's easier to say, well, I tried and I failed, than it is to say that I tried and I succeeded, right? Because what if I fail?
Lots of people get afraid of that success too. They self-sabotage because they're afraid of changing something, right? Their minds failed before. They know what that feels like, so they just go back into that routine. Whereas, success, they don't know what that feels like yet.
Yeah, and it's scary, right? It's the unknown. It's that terrifying fear of the unknown. So what I would suggest to people, and what I suggest to everyone who's listening to this podcast, is if you're in that mindset, if you're in that place where you're fearful of what that unknown is, ask yourself one simple question. Could it be better? What if, instead of asking yourself, what if it goes horribly wrong, you start asking yourself, what if it goes horribly right, in the best possible way? We have sort of gotten to a place where we're constantly thinking about all of these negative things, and we don't ask ourselves, well, what about the positive that can come out of this? What about the good things that might happen? I move across the country. I meet the woman of my dreams. We build a career together. We have children. We change the world, right? That's a magical kind of what if versus the terrifying what if of, I might live on the streets. There are lots of negatives in this world. We don't need to add them for ourselves. So start asking yourself, what could the positives be? What is going to be the joyous outcome maybe of this? Because you're never going to know 100% what that answer is. But if you start approaching it from a positive standpoint rather than a negative, I promise you will find the good in it.
This is amazing. And when you build on that positivity, you see more positivity. You are able to notice the grateful things in your life and the simple things that maybe once before you glazed over, but now like that made your day, and that begins to compound, and then that success compounds on that success, and it just becomes this wonderful ball of success, and you're just looking for all the good, you're noticing all the positivity, and that change begins to take place. And before soon you look back and you go, oh my goodness, look how far I come, because it just feels good and it feels right and you're in the flow.
For me, that all comes back to that, like the law of attraction, right? Where it's like, if you have that positive, uplifting mindset all the time, and that's what you're constantly playing in your head, that's going to come to you. Whereas if you have that negative, like, you get stuck in traffic or you're late for work and you start to have that thought process going through your head of a little bit of negativity, it seems like you do hit every light, and it seems like you do get stuck behind a car accident or whatever it might be. But there's there's all this stuff that gets in the way, and it's that law of attraction where it's like, okay, if I just switch the way I'm thinking and put my focus towards the positive, like Kayla was saying, that positive energy, then you can start to really move your life in that direction. And I think that's so important for most people to really start to acknowledge that, the power of
Absolutely.
positivity.
Well, and it's not a power of positivity all the time everywhere. This is one of the problems I run into with my clients is they say, "Well, I can't be happy about the traffic when it happens." Well, that's fine. Don't be happy about the traffic. But think to yourself, "Well, now that I'm stuck in traffic, do I have a couple of minutes to think about what I'm going to cook for dinner? Do I have a couple of minutes to think about what I could do with the kids on the weekend?" Right? There is a way of looking at even the negative things in your life as giving you space for the positive
Mhm.
things. Because one of the biggest mindset shifts that can happen for people is for us to all start looking at everything that is happening in my life is for the best possible reason. I may not understand what that reason is. I may not agree with that reasoning in this moment, depending on the struggle I'm going through, but it's the best possible thing that could happen to me because change and growth is happening in this process.
Yeah,
I love
we
that.
always say life is happening for you, not to you, right? And that's that
Exactly.
mindset, that paradigm shift where, when you're in that negative state, it's like life is happening to me. It's like, no, it's actually happening for you. Like,
And that is that post-traumatic growth too, right? When we have those stressful times in our lives, whether it's trauma or whether it's just stress, whether you don't understand why your world is imploding, those are the moments where you're learning, you're growing, you're building that self-awareness into becoming that greater version of you. I mean, my vehicle accident when I was 19, I could have used that to define me and going, I'm going to be in chronic pain for the rest of my life. I look back on that now and I'm like, without that moment, I wouldn't be who I am today because I wouldn't have gotten into fitness. I wouldn't have gotten into this wonderful life, and that was revolutionary.
well, and I
Absolutely.
think
Well,
that,
and think about
go ahead.
that one experience, which could have absolutely been a huge negative in your life, not only transformed your life in a positive way, but is now leading to transformation in a positive way in other people's lives as well, right? And that's the mindset piece right there.
That's the biggest part of that shift in our paradigm is that we as humans have this need and this desire to impact other people. It doesn't matter what your choices in life. You always have that desire to do better for others, whether that's to be the best parent or to be the best friend or to just show up in somebody's life that needs you. And that is where our fulfillment really, really comes from, right? It touches that heart space and it fills your cup to know that you are impacting others in a positive manner. And that spreads that positive energy and that spreads the ability to just the possibility that you can make change just like anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And we as human beings are meant to be communal creatures. We are meant to live in pods of people with lots of other people so that we can have those impacts, so that we can see those impacts. And the problem we run into right now, especially over the last couple of years, is we live very much in a digital space where we're not connecting with people, where we're not seeing that transformation happen. So you as an individual have to go a little bit out of your way. You have to make time for people in person when you're comfortable for that. You have to make time to hop on Zoom calls to be able to see people. You have to take time out of your day to text people to remind them, like, hey, don't forget we're getting together, or don't forget about this big thing that's coming up, or whatever it happens to be. It could be as simple as a message like, hey, don't forget you're loved, right? We all appreciate those moments. We all want those moments for ourselves, and we all need to give those moments to other people. That's part of the human experience.
I love it. This is such a great way to start to wrap up this episode because I believe it is truly part of the whole human experience to take risk, to make change, to expand our mindset, and to give back to others. And I think that all comes together in that nice little package of who stepping into the best version of ourselves with all of these tools in place.
Absolutely. And that's the important part, right? The tools. We are not born with the tools necessarily. We're not necessarily taught the tools as we grow up. So as you become an adult, you have to find those tools. And the way that you do that is by putting people in your life who can help to teach you those, right? People come to you guys because they need that tool, but they don't know where else to find it. And you guys are giving them that. And that's the whole point. Build your toolbox. Build your emotional, spiritual, physical toolbox so that you are capable when you need to be of handling whatever comes down the road.
Amazing.
Love it.
I love it. Like that it's the toolbox and there's not one tool for one job. And that's where we often get stuck is that we think that, I need a hammer for this job when maybe you need a
Everybody else
screwdriver.
used a hammer, so I need a hammer, and it's like, you can do it a
Exactly.
different way. There's ways for
Yep.
I
everybody.
could use a mallet or duct tape.
Or duct tape.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Crystal. So if people wanted to get a hold of you and learn all about your Chasing Happiness podcast and your life coaching, where would they find you?
The best place for people to find me is chasinghappiness.ca. People can also email info@chasinghappiness.ca. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all the fun stuff as well, but the website is probably the best place to get in touch.
Perfect.
Wonderful. We will add it to our show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today. I really know that people are going to get so much value from your advice.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been the best part of my week so far, so thank you.
Woo-hoo.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
We hope you loved today's episodes and truly found some value in it. If you want more information from Crystal and any of the programming that she offers, you can find her at www.chasinghappiness.ca, or you can find her on social media at chasinghappiness. That's spelled out DOTCA. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please feel free to like it, share it with a friend, share it with a family member, and check out Crystal's podcast, Chasing Happiness. Thank you all so much. Have an amazing rest of your day. Bye for now.